and the window is replaced. The wound is closed in layers. Now these are few case report. It was a 10-year-old boy who had presented with history of discharging sinus from his legs for 9 months duration. His X-ray and CT scan preoperative. This is the post-operative X-ray with the pellets in situ. Wound has healed, healthy. Patient at 6 months. There is another case of a female of 55 years old with osteomyelitis of calcaneum. You can see the discharging sinus over there. Preoperative X-ray showing the cavity and the intraoperative X-ray with the pellets in situ. The postoperative X-ray at 1 week and 1.5 months with the gradual absorption of the pellets, as you can see. X-ray at 5 months with the bone gradually forming, and the wound at 8 months which is completely healed with no discharge. Not all cases did well though. This is a case of a middle-aged man, post-Torif calcaneum fracture. You can see it has been fixed. And after osteomyelitis, all the implants were removed and the X-ray is such. He was also treated. You can see the pellets in situ over there. Next X-ray. And the discharge is persisting. There is another case of a 35-year-old man with femoral osteomyelitis. Preoperative X-ray and the discharging sinus. Intraoperative, he was again treated with osteomyelitic with calcium sulfate beads. At X-ray at 4 months, we can see that the cavity is gradually being filled up with new bone. The patient at 8 months with a healed wound completely. In the 9 patients, where wound had completely healed up with no discharge, calcium sulfate pellets were absorbed by 2 months in most patients. New bone gradually formed at its place. 1 patient of calcaneal osteomyelitis had persistent discharge even after repeat debridement. We had certain limitations. The study sample size was small, there was no control group, we did not have a functional assessment score, and it was a short-term study. We conclude by saying that chronic osteomyelitis is notorious for late relapse, even with aggressive systemic therapy and surgical treatment. However, in short-term evaluation of these cases, the infection control was found to be satisfactory with antibiotic-loaded calcium sulfate pellets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If the house permits, one speaker from the oncology session came late. If you permit, I can allow him to give talk for 5 minutes. The person has come. My dear friend, it is very painful that you are, this is a young chap, that's why I am dealing with it. In the meantime, you can ask questions from these persons. Please come on the dais. Yes, please. Identify yourself first.
Sir, I am Dr. Raviraj Tantri from Karnataka, Bangalore, sir. My question to Biswajit, sir. Sir, I'm sorry, the slides in the later part of your series went very fast, so I couldn't analyze the studies of that non-union. So I just wanted to ask, how early can you detect non-union with the ultrasonography when compared to the radiography? I couldn't analyze the slides, sir.
Yeah, non-union we could analyze around. In ultrasonography, in non-union we could know something around, say around 10 weeks. But in X-ray we used to get around, say around 16 weeks, 18 weeks like that, 18 weeks, 20 weeks. So ultrasonography we could predict that this patient is going for non-union.
At about on
around 10 weeks, I say, around 10 weeks you can know.
Oh.
That because the nail size will be still prominent.
Okay. And there's no evidence of callus?
Yeah, no appearance of the callus. But X-ray usually takes a long time, say around 14 weeks or 16 weeks like that. The fracture gaps will be clearly appearing at that time only.
And one more question is, how in your study, how often you did ultrasonography? So like every 2 weeks, or how was that?
Yeah, usually the protocol is every 2 weeks. Okay. So you have to counsel the patient properly so that the patient has to come every 2 weekly interval.
Okay, next please, next.
I am Lokesh Maratha from Meerut. My question regarding the ultrasonic evaluation, whether it is the clinical evaluation of the callus formation or of the union, because in your study you have not mentioned about the hypertrophic type of non-union, because in those cases the callus formation is there. So it is the evaluation of the callus formation or of the union, and what happens in the hypertrophic type of non-union?
So, sir, it's a very small series, it's a long way to go. I think some not all types of non-human I haven't analyzed. It's a long way to go, sir. It's a very early study for me.
This is infantile stage, so bear with it.
I want to know how you will analyze the fracture healing if the fracture has been impacted at the time of treatment. Then the nail will not be visible in ultrasound.
So that will,
When we
we
are
have to analyze after say around say 8 weeks, after 6 to 8 weeks we can predict only, sir, whether it is going for healing or not.
How? Because in ultrasonography we are predicting by seeing the nail only.
Those cases have to be excluded from the study. Those cases have to be excluded from the study.
Yeah.
Anyway, please, next speaker. Any question to the next speaker?
Which antibiotic you use?
We commonly use vancomycin. Whenever empirical, it will cover most of the organisms.
And from where you get calcium sulfate? From where you get calcium sulfate?
It's commercially available.
I would like to add one thing over here. This my friend has shown 3 cases of osteomyelitis of the calcaneum. Friends, osteomyelitis of the calcaneum is very rare. In a series of 12 patients, if you see 3 patients of osteomyelitis of the calcaneum pyogenic, it is surprising. And did you try to rule out tuberculosis in the calcaneum?
Sir?
Did you try to rule out tuberculosis in the calcaneum where you were doing repeated?
We took biopsy and we sent it for...
And I just want to add, biopsy can be misleading. You should give a therapeutic trial when the person is not responding. In open fractures or when there is a sinus, if it is tuberculosis, your picture is going to be of pyogenic osteomyelitis. Your clinical sense will tell that it is tuberculosis. Okay? Thank you very much. So, that one speaker came or not? The chairman is waiting for the speaker. This person is going to speak on the tumors. Please hurry up. I am giving you 5 minutes. Already we are short of time. Time is over. Please start, please start. I'm trying to finish in time. No, what was your topic? You are in the next session? What is your name?
I'm not speaker.
Achha, okay. So, okay, the person has not come. I wind up this session. The next session will start. I am going to one of the speaker in that very session. Thank you very much. I thank. So, very good morning everybody and welcome to this hall on behalf of Chairman Dr. R.C. Meena, Professor Head of Department, SMS Medical College, Jaipur. I think all the presentators are well here. I request Dr. Vijay Raghavan. Dr. Vijay Raghavan. So, next paper to be presented by Dr. Anil Kumar, Professor Head of Department, Kanpur Medical College. Anil sir, please. A giant cell tumor of bone, surgical treatment and current concept.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, sir. Today I am going to present my work on the giant cell tumor of bone, current concepts in the management. To the giant cell, I am associated for last 30 years. The giant cell this is the typical picture of the giant cell. Epiphyseal eccentric lesion, lytic lesion in the lower end of the femur and the upper end of the tibia. Now, in this morning, I will go that what are the developments we have made in the last 25 years, what are the developments in the management, and what are the developments in the treatment. I will not go in the detail that what I have done. but I am associated with the developments in the management. The developments in the diagnosis. The fine needle aspiration cytology, it may be CT guided or ultrasound guided if required. And there are the newer imaging techniques which have given us the direction of that the tumor is going in which direction. The imaging techniques are plain radiography, it was the most usual, angiography, CT imaging. The CT imaging is useful in the diagnosis and differential diagnosis, in staging of the tumor, in the design of the prosthesis, and in follow-up of the treatment. When I started the work, these facilities were not available. The ultrasound sonography for the guided FNAC and the bone scan non-specific investigation denotes the increased activity in the infection, fracture, and the tumor and healing of bone. It may also tell us in the case of the multicentric giant cell tumor of the bone. And the latest is the MRI. The MRI has done wonders in the diagnosis because previously we were not sure that what is the position of the vessels and the nerves in relation to the tumor, whether they are outside the tumor or they are inside the tumor. So it has given us the better planning in the treatment. It gives the better contrast between the tumor and the normal tissue. Section can be taken in the axial, sagittal, and the coronal planes. It is valuable imaging modality in detection and delineation of the tumor. It can show the spread of the neoplasm to the adjacent neurovascular structures. MRI gives the correct assessment of the neoplasm spread. It is useful in the evaluating the intraosseous extent of the tumor. Both T1 weighted and T2 weighted images are necessary. The treatment of the giant cell tumor, it has progressed from the curettage and the bone grafting to the latest, the en bloc resection, the prosthetic replacement, and the newer drugs also. Traditionally, the intralesional curettage with the resection and the bone graft, the recurrence rate was the 35 to 42%. And when it was added with this bone grafting, the recurrence rate slightly reduced. The en bloc resection, the recurrence rate is 10%. But this has the multiple complications, and they are the adjuvant therapy also, which has been propagated by some people from time to time. The curettage is still the most adopted treatment. The bidecortication, the window must be big, and in the last 25 years, we have added this curettage with the high-speed burr. After the curettage, the bone is treated by the high-speed burr, and this is the aggressive. The curettage must be aggressive, and the choice of the adjuvant is the personal. We have nothing to say on this. Sometimes the radiation causes the 10% of the sarcometal degeneration, and some people treat with this tumor with the PMMA, liquid nitrogen, phenol, carbon dioxide laser, electrocautery, extend quota by the high-speed burr. It stops the local extension of the margin, and this kills the residual foci. PMMA, it fills the tumor cavity, and the heat kills the tumor cells. This is the theory. Effect size dependent, 8 to 26% recurrence. But it has the one beauty, it has one novelty that if there is the recurrence, we can detect the recurrence in the early. But this bone cement causes the degenerative changes, and it causes the arthritis in the joint. So you can see in this X-ray that when there is the recurrence, it is treated by the curettage and the bone cement, and you can see the recurrence has appeared. This is the latest treatment to prevent the collapse of the joint. There is the subchondral bone grafting. The joint is supported by the bone graft, and then the cavity is filled by anything that may be hydroxyapatite, that may be bone graft, that may be allograft. Cryotherapy. This cryotherapy, there is a three, we use the liquid nitrogen in the 3 cycles, irrigate the cartilage with the cold saline, circumferential necrosis. It is difficult, and complications are soft tissue injury and delayed fractures. This is the method how we go for the cryotherapy. The phenol, bath the cavity with the phenol, and it has got the 10 to 20% recurrence. We have no experience of this procedure. We have never adopted on the basis of the advice of the Tuli, that it do not do any favor to us. The en bloc resection is still the most adopted treatment, and this 12 minute का है expandable bones like the proximal fibula, distal ulna, high recurrence with the other treatment, and there is the it may be used in the case of the recurrence, pathological fracture, and the joint involvement, and the it may be replaced by the osteochondral allograft reconstruction. Spine, the unusual sites, spine, sacrum, these are inaccessible sites, and in this we can give the radiotherapy as an adjuvant to relieve the pain and to reduce the size of the tumor. 3% vertebrae above sacrum, all levels affected equally, affects the vertebral body, restriction with the stabilization, often incomplete. We have used this procedure, the radiotherapy, only in the case of where the site is inaccessible, and to reduce the pain and the size of the tumor, and where there is the incomplete excision and there is local recurrence. Sacrum and pelvis, intralesional excision adjuvant, plus minus, we can give the radiotherapy. GCT, open vascular, preoperative angiography, and we can do the embolization also. This is the picture of the angiography we have done in one case. Developments in the treatment. There is the better understanding of the surgical margins. There is the delayed reconstruction after the en bloc resection, and there is the newer methods of the reconstruction has come there. When we were students, there was no Iljaro method of the dissection osteogenesis. This has replaced Iljaro method of dissection, replaced the operation of the tendoplasty. If you remember, the people of my generation, they will remember that we used to do the tendoplasty, we used to remove, and the lower bone was reverted back and put by long canal. Now there is the custom-made processes, good, but it is very, very costly, and the massive allografts. This has the future in our hands. This is the various surgical margins, which I think you are all aware. Custom-made processes. Still in infancy in India due to undeveloped technology for fabrication, high cost, about 2 to 3 lakhs for each processes, mechanical failure, deep infection, long-term results, and but the good degree of the range of the motion is preserved. This is the reconstruction, this is the processes. Iljaro method. The patient is ambulatory throughout the treatment, no limb length discrepancy, limb is open for the inspection during the course of the treatment, reconstruction of the same thickness, technically demanding, rings and wire can be cumbersome for some patient, because it may take 1 to 1.5 years to complete the treatment. But the reconstruction done in these cases is better than that tendoplasty. Why we prefer the reconstruction by allograft? At our center, we are working on this. The presence of the bone morphogenic protein, a catalyst for osteoinduction even in the modified allografts. Our knowledge that all allograft behaves in the same fashion in process of the bone graft incorporation. Our firm scientific belief that the defect of the human bone must be replaced by the human bone after biological incorporation of the graft participate in the bone physiology and morphology. And after some time you may not be able to differentiate that where is the graft. There is superior long-term results and the least expensive. Now there is the newer drug, denosumab, which has come over this, and the bisphonates. They prevent the osteoclast-like giant cell from the multiplying. It is still in the clinical trials, and there are some reports from the Western world over this, but this drug is not available in India, and there also phase 2 and phase 3 trials are going on this drug. They say that this prevent the osteoclast formation. There are the few we have in the 2007 we published a paper in the IGO, and it is available in the site, and it has been widely quoted in the world literature also, our paper, the multimodal approach in the case of the giant cell tumor of the bone. So we don't suggest any treatment, and each case has the different treatment. This is the case, the lateral condyle femur managed by the curettage and the allografting, and this was the case, and we have used, now we are using the G-bone, and this is the lower end of the radius treated best with the excision and the envelope resection and replacement by the upper end of the fibula of the same side, and in some cases we can also use the curettage with the G-bone grafting. This is the case which has recurred with the G-bone, and we have done this replacement by the upper end of the fibula, and this was the case of giant cell tumor, proximal tibia, beautifully treated by the curettage and the G-bone. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anil sir. No doubt your presentation is on a very common entity which is frequently come across the orthopedic surgeon. So any audience or delegates who want to something know more about Dr. Anil or can like to ask any question, welcome.
Yes.
For joint cell tumor of the vertebrae, wherever it is possible, I think you go for resection or radiotherapy.
If it can be excised, then we must go for the excision, en bloc dissection and the reconstruction. But there are some sites where this tumor cannot be, is inaccessible. We must go for the radiotherapy, we must try. Where this possible, embolization and the en bloc resection followed by the en bloc resection, this may be treated.
You have mentioned one complication of that malignant transformation after radiotherapy. If we give radiotherapy, have you come across any patient malignant transformation due to radiotherapy?
What transformation?
Malignant transformation of the site after radiotherapy, malignant change. Have you come across any case?
In one case, there was after 25 years, there was the sarcometer degeneration. In this case was treated by my most senior person, Professor A.K. Gupta, in 1974 by the curettage and the bone grafting, and followed by the radiotherapy. And this case survived for the 25 years. But ultimately there was the sarcomatous changes that appeared after the 25 years, and we have ultimately amputated, and later on it has the metastasis in the iliac crest. That patient is now no more, but this is the longest follow of the 30 years. But we have not followed the case of the radiotherapy, and we have reserved the radiotherapy only in the inaccessible cases.
This malignant transformation after radiotherapy is a very aggressive tumor. That was my point. He had already said that he had metastasis in the pelvis.
Yes.
Aggressive change.
Aggressive changes.
Morning, sir. I'm I'm Dr. Varun from Hyderabad.
Yes.
Sir, my doubt is, I wanted to know why you don't prefer phenol as a chemical cautery agent.
Actually, I have gone through the one of the paper which is published by Dr. Professor Tuli in the Indian Journal of Cancer, way back about maybe 20 years ago, in which he has written that these adjuvants, they cause the what exactly he has written, that they are the cause for the recurrence. They prevent some immunity, the host immunity is hampered, so there is more chances of the recurrence. This is mentioned in the Indian Journal of Cancer, if you go through it, and that's why we have never preferred this, and we have never find that it has some more, it has some more, it is useful than the plain curettage and bone grafting. It is the autogenous bone graft, which it fights with the some tumor, the remaining portion of the tumor. But the phenol, it hampers the immunity of the host towards the tumor. This I written, you can read this. Exactly, I am not remembering, but this is the text of this, that it prevents it hampers the host immunity towards the tumor. This.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. So nice of you. The next speaker, please. Dr. Gyaneshwar talk. Welcome, Gyaneshwar.
Thank you, sir.
The talk is on the management of benign bone tumors.
Sir, when I was given this topic, I was thinking what to discuss in benign bone tumors, because they are silly benign lesions. But actually they are not the only benign lesions. In fact, the hidden may be malignant lesion, or sometimes these benign lesions can convert into malignant lesions. Plus, an important point I found is that it is difficult to differentiate between the different benign tumors of the bone. Plus, there are some lesions which mimic like benign bone tumor. They are not the benign bone tumors actually. I want to thank my residents and especially Dr. Sherwani for helping me in preparation of this lecture. We'll discuss in this the conditions simulating bone tumors, approach to a case of benign bone tumors, especially radiographic approach, treatment, and about few common benign bone lesions. Neoplasms and lesions that resemble neoplasms are present difficult diagnostic and treatment dilemmas. Many of the lesions that resemble neoplasms occur frequently, cause minimal discomfort or disability, and can be treated simply even without surgery or with minimal surgeries. These are the common lesions which are non-neoplastic, may be metaphyseal fibrous defect, small or large, fibrous dysplasia, and osteofibrous dysplasias. Other similar lesions could be simple bone cyst, fibrous cortical defect, Brown's tumor, and sometimes aneurysmal bone cysts also. Other lesions could have been myositis ossificans, which can be reactive to a simple injury, or Langerhans cells histiocytosis. A group of lesions in which abnormal proliferation of cells starts at earlier age but stops on bony maturity. These lesions are known as hematomas and should be treated or preferably be treated at the bony maturity. These can be enchondromas, osteochondromas, and some osteomas. Approach should be towards early diagnosis for efficient treatment. We can approach these lesions by detailed history and examination with appropriate imaging, lab investigations, and finally histopathology remains the most important tool for diagnosing these lesions. On history, pain, number of lesions, and skeletal location determines mainly or tells us more about the type of tumor. Generally, benign non-growing lesions tend to be asymptomatic and represent incidental findings. Pain, although a non-specific symptom, it may help in differential diagnosis. Pain may be a symptom of growing lesion, malignant tumors, pathological fractures complicating to benign or malignant tumors, significant local tissue reaction to the tumor. Swelling, if benign tumors are presenting in the form of swelling, then the swelling should be examined thoroughly about the extent of lesion, overlying skin, presence of scars and sinuses, deformity if they are presenting like in the form of a deformity, size of swelling, age of swelling and pressure effects by the swelling should be noticed. Palpation should be done for increase in local temperature, local tenderness, fixity to bone and soft tissues, plane of swelling, sinuses and involvement of distal neurovascular structures. Approach, plain radiograph is an important investigative tool for these benign bone tumors. They can present to us as well-defined lytic lesion, ill-defined lytic lesion or sclerotic. Most of the benign tumors are well-defined while the malignant lesions are ill-defined. Both malignant and benign tumors can be sclerotic. Age is also important and location of the tumor is important, whether it is in axial skeleton or in long bones. In long bones too, whether it is diaphyseal, metaphyseal, epiphysis, and in that particular site, whether the lesion is centric or eccentric. The lesions can be solitary or multiple, and periosteal reaction and cortical destruction is very important method by which we can know whether the lesion is benign or malignant. Again, well-defined lesions, benign lesions are mostly well-defined, while malignant lesions are ill-defined. Few examples of well-defined lesions are non-ossifying fibroma, osteoblastoma, fibrous dysplasias, simple and aneurysmal bone cysts, and so on. While ill-defined lesions are malignant lesions like osteosarcomas, Ewing sarcoma, sclerotic are important sclerotic benign lesions are osteoblastomas, osteoid osteomas. Zone of transition is also important. In patients, a narrow zone of transition is noticed in non-ossifying fibroma, simple bone cysts and aneurysmal bone cysts. Wide zone of transition indicates malignancy or sometimes infection, or it may be visible in eosinophilic granulomas. Solid type of periosteal reaction is present in benign lesions, while lamellated and spiculated is noticed in aggressive lesions, and Codman's triangle is found in very aggressive type of tumors. Malignant tumors don't cause a benign periosteal reactions usually. Benign periosteal reaction in an osteoid osteoma and malignant in a aggressive sarcomas. Complete destruction may be seen in high-grade malignant lesions, but also in locally aggressive benign lesions. More uniform cortical bone destruction can be found in benign and low-grade malignant lesions. Ballooning is a special type of cortical destruction visible in chondromyxoid fibromas and giant cell tumors. Location, these different tumors may be present at different locations with preponderance, although there is no definite site for definite lesion. In the same way, in the long bones, the lesions could have been diaphyseal, metaphyseal, diaphyseometaphyseal, or epiphyseal. The lesions could have been centric, eccentric, or juxtacortical, like simple bone cyst. In central diaphyseal lesion, non-ossifying fibroma, metaphyseal, eccentric lesion. Similar way, cortical lesion, osteoid osteoma, and aneurysmal bone cyst as centric diaphyseal or metaphysio-diaphyseal lesion. Chondroid matrix may be there or osteoid matrix may be there. Chondroid matrix is commonly in enchondromas, peripheral chondrosarcomas and chondrosarcomas, and osteoid matrix, osteosarcoma and osteoid osteomas. Most tumors are solitary lesions, but they can be polyostotic or multiple also. Common example of benign bone tumors which are polyostotic are non-ossifying fibroma, fibrous dysplasia, enchondromas, osteochondromas. Malignant ones are leukemias and malignant Ewing sarcomas. The other investigative modality is CT scan. It is also useful to detect the lesion inside the bone. Osteoid osteomas could have been very well seen, which are not visible on X-rays, as well as the sites which are not favorable sites for detection of different sites like spine. CT scan could have been a better tool. Bone scan shows us biological activity taking place at the lesion site, and PET scan is also very important tool which actually tells the physiology of the lesion, which will be later discussed in next lecture. Systemic investigations are not very useful in benign lesions, but they can be
2 minutes are there only.
Sir, they can be deranged in malignant lesions. Biopsy is the definitive tool for us to make the diagnosis. Treatment benign bone tumors are, few of them are leave me alone lesions, which says that no treatment is required, only wait and watch is enough. If symptoms develop, then operate. Most commonly, although we can not generalize and we should not generalize the treatment, but the general treatment could have been intralesional curettage and bone grafting plus with or without adjuvants. Few examples: osteochondromas could have been treated very well with excision. These are hematomas, has cartilages, but a point of caution here is we should always suspect about the chondrosarcomas. Main treatment is observed till skeletal maturity and then surgical resection. Enchondromas usually presents with mild traumas, may or may not be pathological fractures. Lesions are discovered on radiography incidental finding, curettage and bone grafting are treatment. Osteoid osteoma, same, pains. The patient presents with pain, worse at night, and typically responses to salicylates. Removal of tumor, including the wall, is done. Minimally invasive tools like percutaneous radiofrequency ablation is also done at some centers. Unicameral bone cyst presents at the long ends of the bone. Common sites are humerus and femur. Children and adolescents are the patients. Requires curettage and bone grafting, may be treated with intralesional injections of steroids or sclerosing agents. Aneurysmal bone cysts are rapidly progressive lesions, expansile at the metaphysio, diaphyseal location. In fact,
Gyaneshwar, play your last slide, take home message,
sir,
please.
Sir, giant cell tumors are another benign tumors, but they can be locally aggressive also. The treatment are different, as have been discussed in previous lecture. To conclude, these tumors requires high degree of suspicion. They can be silent lesions where no active treatment is required, just observation. The diagnosis is easily made by radiography, and early diagnosis and prompt treatment is important in case, especially in cases of benign tumors which are locally aggressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Gyaneshwar. Very nice. The observation of the dice, I think your topic was more concerned on the management, but you have explained much more about the investigation diagnosis. Thank you.
Management
Please, no
includes
problem.
diagnosis and treatment.
The next speaker is ready to present the paper is Vijay Khairwal. Vijay sir, please welcome. But keep in the mind about the time, because the next session is valedictory session, is that right?
I will finish 1 minute before.
Oh, no sir, no sir. The time awarded for you is the golden hour of you.
I promise to you.
Thank you very much.
This one. Yeah. Good morning, friends. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, sir.
Friends, any new modality which comes into the medical science, with times, indications, they changes. Where is the pointer? Pointer. Just please tell. Friends, father of the nation. He has said, till such time there is tear even in one eye, our democracy is incomplete. Even after 60 years, only Almighty knows when this day will come. And he has also said, Mother Earth can fulfill our needs, but not our greeds. But friends, greed for knowledge, there is no end. It continues. Role of PET and PET-CT surveillance of bone tumors. In the last 3 decades, with the advances in the field of science, marvelous changes in the imaging technology, contributing a lot in bone tumor prognosis due to better diagnosis to better follow-up. PET and PET-CT is one of them, but no modality, friends, can replace a good clinical examination. They are all complementary to each other. The uses of the PET and PET-CT, it helps in initial localization of the lesion along with MRI. Few people say that at this stage it is of no use. The MRI and CT, they can well localize, but very small lesion, it is useful. Differentiate between benign and malignant. About aggressiveness, it helps in staging and restaging for planning the definitive treatment. For restaging, I mean after neoadjuvant chemotherapy, we can restage the tumor. So to see the response to the neoadjuvant and adjuvant chemotherapy, to rule out local recurrence from tissue reaction due to radiotherapy and surgical intervention. At times, we are in a difficult situation to state whether it is a recurrence of the tumor or it is a reaction to the surgical trauma or the radiotherapy. Follow-up of the regular cases, and especially useful for metastatic bone disease, especially lytic lesions where your bone scan may not help. In multiple myeloma, the bone scan does not help, but it can help to see the marrow and even can guide with, for biopsy also, to locate primary and metastases of unknown origin, and to locate and rule out other sites of METs in isolated metastases to plan a definitive treatment, because we may need a curative treatment. In sarcomas, where they spread by blood to mostly to the lungs, but regional lymph node involvement, it differentiates between whether it is a reactive change or the actual involvement of the lymph node, because that becomes stage 4 disease. I am showing you few examples. This is a patient of osteosarcoma who presented upper end of the humerus, 30-year-old male. This was the MRI, but the PET scan revealed a lymph node in the axilla and also metastasis in the chest. The plan of the treatment totally changed. Another patient, the X-ray and bone scans, they are showing there was a fracture, pain, and this patient was having carcinoma of the liver, hepatoma, and metastases were due to that. But unfortunately, that picture of PET scan is missing. These are the MRI. Another patient, this patient presented to me. I was visiting professor in Nepal, pain in the hip region, mimic sciatica. X-ray nothing, lumbosacral spine nothing. But MRI I took, there was small lesion in the pelvis. This X-ray chest was done later on. There was small lesion in the pelvis. We thought it is non-specific. And we gave analgesics, the patient improved. He came happy after 2 days, but I saw he was coughing. So I said, when this cough to you, he said, for the last 3-4 days, this has also started occurring. So I said, you go for X-ray chest. And in the X-ray chest, friend, this was the lesion. And in such like lesions, your PET will help whether this lesion in the pelvis is an isolated lesion or it is a widespread disease, which can help you planning the definitive treatment. If it is an isolated lesion, you can go for excision of the primary tumor along with resection of the pelvis. Another patient, this patient has pain in the spine, 60 years old. There is compression of the vertebrae. Well, it can be osteoporotic fracture also, but at times we are in dilemma. When the dilemma is too much, at that time your PET will help, whether it is a simple osteoporotic fracture or it is a malignant disease. I did not do PET scan in these cases because every patient cannot afford. That will be a limitation of this study. I will show you at the end, but here it can help if the patient can afford. Another patient, GCT case, came after 3 years with pain again. The X-ray was not conclusive whether the recurrence has occurred or not, whether it is a change in the bone, MRI and PET scan, it can definitely help in these cases whether it is local recurrence or it is a reaction. Another patient, this patient on histology was diagnosed as lymphoma, but it was presenting like tuberculosis of the clavicle. In such cases, if you go for PET, the higher uptake at the site will tell you that to some extent it is collaborating with your thinking of malignancy. And this patient turned out to be lymphoma of the bone, because this is a widespread disease. Another patient, this patient presented to us with sciatica-like pain. We did X-ray spine, MRI, and in the MRI along with disc, we find 2-3 vertebra, there were signal changes. So the PET scan was done, and the PET scan, the lesion was not found at the primary site. This is a weakness. There are few malignancies which cannot be seen even on the PET scan. Every investigation was done, but I took the medical opinion, the doctor did not advise. Ultimately, this patient has melena, and on endoscopy, he found that there was a growth in the stomach. So the stomach growth can be missed even on PET scan. That will be the weakness I will tell you later on. Carcinoma cervix, AVN head of femur after radiotherapy. Friends, most of the times after radiotherapy, pain occurs in the hip joint in the pelvic malignancies, and the radiologist usually gives the report, if he is not experienced one, that it is metastasis. Friends, these are not metastasis, this is aseptic necrosis. Treat it like that, and if you are in doubt, your PET will also help without going for biopsy. This is a mistake which I did, and which is a lesson for all of us. This patient came to me at the age of 55 with pain in the hip region. I took classes of the postgraduates, thinking it is metastasis. The patient could not afford PET scan, and it was not available also. I am visiting professor in Nepal. So I did biopsy, and one report was it is osteoblastoma, another report was it is osteosarcoma. But my aim is to tell you that in such like situation, if I would have PET scan, this would have guided me further. And in these cases, this is a lesson for all of us. In these cases, the biopsy should be done as I am doing biopsy for a primary tumor. Because you may make it stage 4, it is presenting you as a stage 1 tumor. So in these cases, every lytic lesion in the bone is not metastasis. Even in old age, it can be a primary tumor. Another patient, soft tissue tumor in the pelvis region and the upper thigh. But when the MRI was done, the bone was also involved. But we were unable to tell whether it is a reactionary change or the bone is actually involved. But if this patient did not afford PET scan, if the patient can afford PET scan, we can make whether the bone is also having malignancy or it is only in the soft tissue, and that totally changes your plan of treatment. Same patient. Friends, this was a patient, a lady presented with pain in the shoulder with cough for last 3-4 years, CT guided biopsy in the lung, infective pathology. FNAC from the shoulder, again FNAC, infective pathology, but to my mind it did not appeal, and I did open biopsy from the shoulder, and this came out to be frank adenocarcinoma from the lung. So what my aim is to tell you that this patient, if PET is available, this will tell you that there is some malignancy in the lung and these are metastases. This was the function after chemotherapy and calcitonin, etc. Another patient, carcinoma tongue. Given radiotherapy, 5 years back patient reports with discharge, with pain in the tooth. Every time he goes to the dentist, he does something and treat it as an infection. Somebody says it is reaction, somebody says it is malignancy. Friends, this patient on suspicion, because his look from the face, I don't have clinical photograph, to my mind it appeared that it is tuberculosis at the site of radiotherapy, and this patient responded very well. My idea of telling is that in a patient of tuberculosis after malignancy at the same site where you have given radiotherapy, have done surgery, even the histology may not help you. And if the PET would have been there, it would have differentiated whether it is an infective pathology or it is a recurrence of the tumor.
Only 1 minute more, sir.
Yes, I am going to finish, sir. The drawbacks, false positive in certain conditions like PZ, osteomyelitis, false negative benign tumor, unable to differentiate between benign and low-grade malignant, cost factor. Friends, these are the realities of life, extreme beauty. This is the end. I am thankful to the postgraduate. I write, it is a very long journey. He said, sir, you write like this, it is a never-ending journey. Amrita Sensen, according to him, the fruit of science must reach to the poorest of the poor till such time we have no right to celebrate. I am thankful to our Honorable Prime Minister. The 2 lines, if the chair permits, which he says, ऊंचे ऊंचे पर्वतों पर ना घास होती है, ना जीवन होता है, ना पक्षी होता है. मेरे प्रभु ऐसी ऊंचाई मत देना, किसी के काम ना आसकूं, ऐसी रुखाई मत देना. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. So nice of you, Dr. Vijay. Impressive. The next speaker on the oncology section, Dr. Mazhar Abbas. The topic for the Mazhar Abbas is allocated management of bone cystic lesion of the bone current concept and next.
नहीं वो नहीं है.
Yes, Gyaneswar.
कहाँ है? इसको तो नहीं आ रहा. मज़हर अब्बास. ये
So, my topic is management of benign cystic lesions of bone, current concepts and evidence. The common cystic lesions of the bones are these, but I will concentrate on the upper one too, that is a unicameral bone cyst and a rhizomal bone cyst. The unicameral bone cyst is one of the commonest lesions of childhood. It's more consistent with the developmental or reactive lesion rather than a tumor. 85% occurred in the first 2 cases with 2:1 male preponderance. It is most common in the proximal humerus and femur. In adults, the ilium and calcaneum may be other site locations. It is most active during skeletal growth. It usually heals spontaneously because it is not seen in adults. It is asymptomatic unless a fracture, pathological fracture has occurred. A fracture can stimulate the cyst to heal. On radiographic examination, it is centrally located purely lytic lesion with a well-marginated outline. It may expand concentrically but never penetrates the cortex. It is multiloculated, no periosteal reaction unless there has been a fracture. And there is a fallen fragment sign once there is a fracture, fragment is floating in the cystic fluid. It is a metaphyseal lesion that abuts the feces in the growing child, and it moves closer with the growth of the child towards the diaphysis. And it is classified as active when the lesion is within 1 centimeter of the feces and is latent when they are closer to the diaphysis. The pathogenesis, the focal defects in the metaphysis, fecal remodeling that leads to blockage of the interstitial fluid drainage, and that increases the intraosseous pressure, leading to focal bone necrosis and accumulation of the fluid. Because there are more slides, I'll leave the pathology and histopathology. Klein describes cyst index aimed at predicting the future risk of a pathologic fracture. The cyst index is defined as the area of the UBC measured via its widest dimension divided by the diameter of the diaphysis at the same level. Based on their statistical analysis, 57 patients with UBCs, these authors recommended mainly observation for humeral cyst when the cyst index is less than 4, and for femoral cyst when the cyst index is less than 3.5. Natali et al., they did quantitative computed tomography based rigidity analysis and they said that it is more specific, that is 97% as compared to the radiographic evaluation. And the treatment of a simple bone cyst consists of, if it is a small asymmetric lesion in the upper extremity, only observation with serial plane radiograph. Larger lesions, lesion at risk for pathological fracture, symptomatic lesions, and lesions in the lower extremities, curettage with or without bone grafting or internal fixation may be required. Aspiration and injection, often using steroid, bone marrow aspirates, or demineralized bone strength may be used. The pathological fractures in the upper extremity, simple conservative management is enough because that leads to healing of the cyst. Fractures through the UBC in the proximal femur, one should go for curettage and bone grafting and internal fixation. Flexible intermedullary nailing has been used in the femur and humerus, and that provides early stability, often obviating the need for a cast and decreases the risk of further pathological fracture. Steroid injection was introduced in 1970s, and it is inexpensive and involves less morbidity, and it is used on a sedated or anesthetized child under fluoroscopic guidance. Cystogram should be used before injection to delineate the outline of the cyst and to be sure that the needle is in the cyst. Generally, 80 to 200 milligram of methylprednisolone is used. It works by anti-prostaglandic effect or by decreasing the pressure of the cyst because we aspirate the cyst before we inject into it. If the lesion does not allow radiographic signs of healing in 2 months, repeat injection should be considered. More than 90% of the patient can be treated successfully in this matter. The Skageti 1975 3 years follow-up study, they showed the partial or complete healing of the cavity in 96% of the patients. Oppenheim and Galileo 1984, they did a comparative study of steroid injection with curettage and bone grafting and showed better results with injection and significant complication rates in surgically treated group. Kompanecki et al. 1986 reported similar results with the steroid injections and curettage and bone grafting, and they recommended less invasive method of treatment as a method of choice. The poor prognostic factor of steroid injections are multiloculated appearance, large size, and radiologically active, that is closer to the growth plate. Other materials which may be used are autogenous bone marrow mixed with allograft, demineralized bone matrix, high porosity hydroxyapatite, calcium sulfate, and cancellous allograft. No study has shown the superiority of one type of injection over another. After 3 injections, without healing, curettage and bone grafting should be considered. The surgery is curettage and bone grafting and internal fixation that have already considered. Let us talk about ineligible bone cyst. It is not considered, again, this is not a true neoplasm. It is locally destructive, blood-filled reactive lesion of the bone. Most common locations are metaphysis, metaphysiodiaphyseal area of the proximal humerus, distal femur, proximal tibia, and spine. Vertebral lesions, 15 to 28% of the cases, mostly in the lumbar region, in the posterior elements, with frequent extension into the vertebral body or to the adjacent level. These are some examples of lesions in the proximal humerus, spine, proximal femur, proximal tibia, and distal tibia. It's usually common, obviously, in the younger children, younger than 20 years, with a slight female predominance. It is mild to moderate. It has mild to moderate pain that has been present for weeks to several months. Rapid growth can occur and clinically may mimic a malignancy. So therefore, one should always consider malignant lesion as a differential diagnosis. Spinal lesions may cause neurological deficit or radicular pain. On radiographic examination, this is an expansile lesion that elevates the periosteum but remains contained by a thin shell of cortical bone. Can have a well-defined margin or a permeative appearance. It is most often eccentrically located in the metaphysis. Bone scan shows diffuse of peripheral tracer uptake with central location area of decreased uptake. These are examples. Another example, one is the metacarpal, proximal humerus, and distal tibia. On CT and MRI examination, CT scan is helpful for cysts in areas of complex anatomy such as the spine or pelvis. MRI shows the multiloculated cavities and fluid levels. When differentiating between a unicameral and aneurysmal bone cyst using MRI, the presence of a double density fluid level and interlesional septations usually indicates an aneurysmal bone cyst. Again, I'll leave the pathology and pathogenesis. The treatment is, it is non-surgical treatment is arterial embolization. The selective arterial embolization has shown promise in small studies with angiography. Embolic agents such as springs or foam placed in the feeding artery to ABC that cuts the nutrient supply and altering the hemodynamics of the lesions. The advantages are it is able to reach difficult locations, it is able to save joint function when subchondral bone destruction is present. It avoids complications associated with invasive surgery like bleeding. Selective arterial embolization may also be performed within 48 hours before surgery to reduce the amount of hemorrhage. The indications are the diagnosis, one should be sure about the diagnosis to a reasonable level before embarking on this method of treatment. There should be technical feasibility and safety. There should be no evidence of pathological fracture, and there should not be any neurological involvement. The other modality that can be used as an interlesional injection may be attempted for cases in which surgical access is difficult and in which the modality are, other modalities are contraindicated. Evidence shows that the use of calcitonin and methylprednisolone injection leads to regression of the aneurysmal bone cyst. They combine the inhibitory angiostatic and fibroblastic effect of the methylprednisolone with the osteoclastic inhibitory effect of the trabecular bone stimulating properties of calcitonin. This study was reported by Bush et al. They are performed under CT guidance and anesthesia. Progress of the ABC must be closely monitored and may need to be repeated several times. Years may pass before the ABC resolves. Another method which was used by Adams, Baum et al. Ethibloc, that is injection is also performed under CT guidance and anesthesia. The injection solution is a mixture of zine, oleum, papaverase, and propylene glycol, and acts as a fibrosing agent, and an inflammatory reaction may occur after its administration. And an Australian study by Clare in 15 patients suggested percutaneous aspiration and injection of ABC using an aqueous solution of calcium sulfate. Clare concluded that this procedure has clearly early clinical and radiological responses and low complication rates in a consecutive group of patients with ABC. Percutaneous sclerotherapy is also an effective method, as shown by some studies. Drawbacks are no tissue available for definitive diagnosis. In a study done at the Alder Institute of Medical Sciences, a percutaneous sclerotherapy with polidocanol is a safe alternative to the conventional surgery. It can be used at surgically accessible site, can be performed on an outpatient basis. There is another percutaneous doxycycline treatment of cyst that shows that 20 of the 20 patients demonstrated reduction in lytic destruction and bony healing. Recurrence rate in this series was 5% at more than 24 months. The contraindication again for if the patient has an allergy to the injection component, if there is a pathological